This was a great turnabout. After Palladio's death, Vicenza becomes a destination for travelers with an enthusiasm for architecture, most wanting to get an up-close look of his inventions, as did Inigo Jones, who took the lessons learnt back to England. If these works are not seen in their own settings, writes Goethe, one doesn't have the true concept. Or better still, one can get it by flicking through the pages of Palladio's treatise. This is done throughout Europe, as many opportune editions and translations show. And one can extract an image of paradoxical synthesis looking at the Scamozzian perspectives of the Teatro Olimpico. Paradoxical because Scamozzi produced them almost as a mockery of Palladio, to show the people that his inventions made a Vicenza that was new only in the transient virtuality of a scene with plaster and papier-mâché. This severe criticism became a boomerang. The Austrian Emperor Joseph II needed only 5 minutes in the Olimpico to have a sufficient image of the city. This doesn't mean that architecture in Vicenza stays Palladian after Andrea's death. Scamozzi's perspectives may turn out to be a boomerang, but only for foreigners. The people of Vicenza continue to appreciate his projects for more than a century, a very much longer approval than that reserved for Palladio. The people of Vicenza embraced Scamozzi's proposal, also developed by Antonio Pizzoccaro, to eliminate the many diverse, heroic Palladian inventions and to supply nobles with palaces worthy of their rank. A status symbol of their class, but almost all identical and marked by the homologating Serliana. Palladio delivered his patrons the variety of magnificence, whereas Scamozzi promoted common dignity for nearly all of the 17th century. After a lengthy oblivion, the 1700s sees the return of the teachings of Palladio. From this point on, the images of Vicenza will concentrate on his buildings and those inspired by him. It is another great period which corresponds to a sensitive growth of the urban weave. New protagonists: Muttoni, Massari, Arnaldi, Bertotti, Scamozzi, Calderari. Among the greatest of Veneto in the 1700s, new neighborhoods, new palaces, palaces which resume the variety of Palladio's imagery, the projections of volumes, the strong use of light and dark, and give life to an architecture that is less abstractly scientific and more material. The season of Palladian architecture begins and is a worldwide phenomenon, the only architectural style that derives from the name of the artist. But we mustn't think of this as purely copying Palladian inventions. More than a century has passed since the end of the Renaissance. One must translate that lesson, and Vicenza becomes a sort of highly advanced school where one can study and create modern architecture. Goethe understands this perfectly. If I should follow my desires, I would stay here for a month. I would follow a quick course in architecture and then continue at peace with myself. Palladian villas begin appearing outside Vicenza even before this. He himself reports this in his treatise regarding the Rotonda that is not included in the villas section due to its proximity to the city, such that one can say it is in the city itself. But the Rotonda is not the first or last. The same applies for Gian Giorgio Trissino's villa in Criccoli, where Andrea della Gondola receives the demanding nickname of Palladio, to the Bertesina villas, to Villa Valmarana on the slopes of Monte Berico, extraordinarily frescoed by Tiepolos Jr. and Senior. The urban villas are a sign that in Vicenza the architecture is always integrated with nature, by parks and gardens, by hills that begin just beyond the walls. The sign that the city expands naturally in its surroundings, surroundings that travelers in the 18th century considered to be the most beautiful in all of Europe. In Palladio's designs, there is something truly divine, or so said Goethe. It is his capacity to interpret classical architecture in modern terms. His villas make use of every element of ancient temples, tympanum, columns, dome, and loggias. Hofmannsthal writes that they are houses for the gods, and in describing the Rotonda says it is a building constructed for such pleasure that it seems destined not for men but gods. And if they be men that dwell here, they must have something divine in their blood to endure a residence such as this. In fact, the walls and ceilings are so covered with divine depictions that men and gods are often separated by only a few meters. These temple villas celebrate nature, the territory that Palladian architecture accepts like no other. Work is celebrated, a new society which imposes itself with the force of agriculture rather than weapons. No one before Palladio was able to show with such force an architecture which foretells the future. Those that succeed me will, by my example, be able to easily reduce the magnificence of their constructions to the true beauty and loveliness of old. It is an architecture that, in both city and countryside alike, privileges private residences and confers a public dignity, an immediately recognizable prestige. It is an architecture that rereads from the past and throws open the future, that offers residences for a new leading class, for a new society. This is the basis of the international success of Palladian imagery that spreads through Protestant countries in the north of Europe such as England and through rebel colonies which will become the United States of America. Its influence can also be seen in St. Petersburg's palaces and the Tsar's residences. A human measure, a divine breath, a new frontier, underlines Goethe, which is born in Vicenza to span each continent over 500 years and still today. Tomorrow I leave Vicenza, writes Goethe, and I do so unwillingly. For me, there are too many things here.